Who is Morgoth, or Melkor, the original big baddie in Tolkien's Legendarium? Let's find out. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. If you like theories, background, history and lore about The Lord of the Rings, A Song of Ice and Fire and The Witcher, then this is the channel for you. Welcome. The main villain of The Lord of the Rings was obviously Sauron, but Sauron himself, in his time, was lieutenant to a greater, more primal evil, Morgoth. And to understand Morgoth, we need to go way back, before even the beginning of time. Middle-earth, Arda, and all that is, was created by Eru Ilúvatar through the Song of the Ainur as set out in the Silmarillion. Basically, Eru created the Ainur, divine spirits, each the offspring of Eru's thought, and given understanding of that part of Eru's mind. The mightiest of these Ainur was Morgoth. Although, just to clear up the nomenclature here, his original name was actually Melkor. Morgoth is the name Feanor gave him later as a curse. Melkor basically means mighty one, whereas Morgoth is more like black foe or dark tyrant. To make things easy, I'll mostly just call him Morgoth in this video. Early on, he began to develop heretical, independent thoughts and sought long for the flame imperishable, which is the creative force in Tolkien's world. He wanted to make things of his own and rule. However, he couldn't find the flame imperishable because it was only in Eru Ilúvatar. But then Eru directed the Ainur to singing creation into life. They all had their own parts, as they all knew different parts of Eru's mind and will. But Morgoth did not want to sing Ilúvatar's song. He sang his own tune, discordant to the main song of the Ainur. Ilúvatar stopped it. Started up again, stopped again when Morgoth again created discord, started again, and finally called a halt to the whole thing. Ilúvatar's final theme was, however, unquenchable and finished on its own terms, but that didn't stop Morgoth trying to oppose it. Despite Morgoth's constant interruptions, Eru showed that creation happened anyway, and that nothing happened without his express will. He said, "Thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined." It's quite the put-down, and for a time Morgoth was humbled and joined the Ainur that wished to go down into this new creation, watch over it and aid the children of Ilúvatar when they arrived. But his heart was still his own, and he secretly, then not so secretly, wished not to guide and steward this new creation, but control and dominate it. He rebelled and fought against the faithful Ainur. Those au fait with Christian theology will see a lot of echoes of Lucifer here. This is clearly intentional on Tolkien's part. We talk often of his influences from Norse and other mythologies, but he was a committed, practicing Catholic, and there are few places in his Legendarium where this influence is clearer. So Morgoth fell, and what followed was untold eons of struggle between him and the Valar, the loyal upper echelon Ainur who had descended to Arda to protect and rule it, covered just in a couple of pages of the Silmarillion. We read that he descended upon Arda in power and majesty greater than any other of the Valar, as a mountain that wades into the sea and has its head above the clouds and is clad in ice and crowned with smoke and fire. And the light of the eyes of Melkor was like a flame that withers with heat and pierces with a deadly cold. Put simply, Morgoth was immense and powerful, the most powerful of all the Valar, the most powerful being in Arda and Middle-earth, and it wasn't even close. The Valar, all of them that were there, shaped and moulded Arda, and he destroyed it, and they seemed powerless to stop him. Eventually, another Valar did arrive, Tulkas, the Laughing Warrior, and tipped the balance of power against Morgoth. But though he retreated for a while, he gathered his strength and called together the other creatures that had fallen with him, Balrogs and others, and attacked again, destroying the lamps, the first main source of light for Arda, and building his mighty fortress of Utumno. And the Valar retreated before him. They set themselves up in Aman, a different continent, made themselves a new source of light, the two trees, and largely abandoned Middle-earth to Morgoth. If you ever need to understand Morgoth's power, That should be enough of an indication. All 14 of the Valar, plus their Maiar, retreated before Morgoth and his Maiar and other servants. It's why he discovered the elves first when they awoke. He corrupted many of them, turning them into orcs, in one version of the Legendarium anyway, killed others and turned still more of them against the Valar before they had even encountered them. Eventually, though, the Valar did discover the elves and decided to go to war once more, and this time they were successful. Morgoth was captured and imprisoned for 3 ages. These 3 ages were when the Eldar elves came to live in peaceful harmony with the Valar in Valinor. Many more stayed in Middle-earth. As in hiding, waiting, did some of Morgoth's chief and most powerful supporters, like the Balrogs, for example. But things were still broadly peaceful. This toing and froing of the balance of power between Morgoth and the other Valar is one of the main themes of the early part of Arda's history. Sometimes the Valar held the upper hand and sometimes Morgoth pushed them back. He had many allies, including many Maiar, the second and lower order of Ainur, but in terms of Valar it was 1 against 14, and Melkor, Morgoth, triumphed almost as often as his opponents. There is no doubt that he was not only the most powerful Valar, but he was by a long way. Tolkien says that to Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He was different, special, and greater both in the heights he could have reached and the depths he plumbed, and while he was chained, Arda and Middle-earth could thrive. It would always be marred by his initial interference, but for a time it was at peace. Eventually, though, Morgoth's prison term ended, and he was freed after promising to be a very good Valar from then on. He obviously lied, and to their credit some of the Valar did not believe him, but they were overruled. His revenge was to turn the Noldor elves against the Valar, destroying the new light source, the 2 trees, with the help of Ungoliant, steal the Silmarils, which held the last light of the trees, and escape back to his stronghold in Middle-earth. The Noldor followed, led by Feanor, who wanted his Silmarils back. Feanor was killed by Balrogs before he got to Morgoth, but his sons laid a very long siege to Angband, Morgoth's new stronghold, and the Valar, well, they just largely ignored what was happening in Middle-earth, except Ulmo, of course. He never forsook the elves and humans, even when the other Valar did. Anyway, all that led to what we know as the First Age of Middle-earth. The elves may have thought that they had Morgoth besieged in his own fortress, but in reality he was just biding his time and building his forces. He grew his orc army, invented dragons and trolls, and plotted his world domination plan. Eventually, his forces broke the siege, and one by one the elven strongholds of Middle-earth fell. Morgoth's victory seemed inevitable. It was only a final mass assault by all the might of the Valar and Valinor that ended Morgoth's rule. Morgoth was flung into the void, never to return to Arda while the Valar watch over it, except perhaps in the last battle at the end of time, according to the second prophecy of Mandos, where he will finally be slain by Turin Turambar in righteous vengeance for all the wrongs done him and all mankind. But although Morgoth was defeated at the end of the First Age, his legacy and influence lived on. Many perhaps will have thought that with Morgoth's death, the threat of evil was gone, but it lived on firstly through the many of his followers who survived the War of Wrath, Sauron chiefly among them, but also the Balrog we know as Durin's Bane, and a lot of orcs and trolls and some dragons. But secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, Tolkien explains that Morgoth had poured his will so much into the very matter of Arda that he marred it beyond the ability of anyone but Ilúvatar himself to mend. His lies live on, therefore, in the hearts of elves and men, and now evil can never truly be ended, just hemmed back before it returns elsewhere like a new shoot on a dark tree. This idea of Arda marred and Morgoth's ring is a central part of Tolkien's philosophical backdrop to his legendarium, and I can't really do it full justice here, but if you want to know more, I did a video dedicated to exploring it. In practical terms, this continuation of Morgoth's legacy is shown through Sauron, his chief lieutenant, who had escaped judgment at the end of the War of Wrath, then rose to power later in the Second Age. Yes, Sauron was his own man, or Maiar, but at a conceptual level he was also an echo of Morgoth, that more primal evil. Tolkien wrote that, "In after years, Sauron rose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void." Noticeably, when Sauron corrupts the people of Numenor and builds a great temple, it is not to worship himself, but Morgoth. So, what are we to make of Morgoth? Well, he is undoubtedly more complex than just a big baddie. His drive was to conquer and control, yes, but his initial fall came from his desire to create, to do something new and different, to have the freedom to do what he wanted, not just what Eru Ilúvatar expected. It, like Milton's Lucifer in Paradise Lost, makes him a figure we know we need to oppose, but we understand his drive and need to be free and to create for himself. We are ourselves sub-creators, as Tolkien would put it, and I suppose face the same temptations to power and control. The irony here, of course, is that for all Morgoth's freedom he claimed for himself and everything he did, we have to come back to Eru Ilúvatar's speech to him before time began. "No theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite, for he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined." Morgoth may have turned the world upside down in pursuit of freedom and control, but ultimately everything he did was in Ilúvatar's plan, and all the evil he did was actually for good. His destruction of the lamps led to the creation of the trees. His destruction of the trees led to the creation of the sun. Stealing the Silmarils led to the Noldor returning to Middle-earth and saving many elf lives, and so on. Perhaps the most damning irony, though, is that which Eru said to Morgoth before he fell. "Thou, Melkor, wilt discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but a part of the whole and tributary to creation's glory." In other words, Morgoth may have fought for his freedom and thought he was free, but he was not. All that he did and all that was a part of Eru's ineffable plan from the start, and eventually Morgoth himself realised this. His long ages imprisoned in the void will have been tortured by the realisation that everything he had done had ultimately been for the glory of Eru, the master he revolted against. If you'd like to see more Lord of the Rings videos, please click on the link to my playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.